Good evening. Today is Tuesday, September 14, and this is our curriculum committee. So I'm gonna be the acting chair for tonight because Board Adams has been excused. So it's gonna be myself, Board Bondo, and Board Rodriguez attending the meeting tonight. So. I think we can go ahead, Maria. I think we have to approve the minutes for the minutes from the last meetings, right? Can we do it? We just have two of us here.
I think
yes,
you
we can do it. I'll move to approve the minutes.
Okay. So do we have any comments? I think any change?
Nope, we're good.
So we are all in favor, right? So,
yep, absolutely.
All right. Minutes approved. So I'm just passing on to you, Maria. Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks, Mickey. Hi, everyone. So thanks to folks for being here. And like I said, we'll get a couple more people here once they get their links sorted out. I thought we could do some quick intros just so folks know names, face, roles. So I will pass it. Marissa, will you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. I'm Marissa Emerson. I'm one of the school counselors at Portland High School, and I'm also the AP coordinator for Portland High School.
Thanks, Marissa. And Molly?
Hi, everybody. I'm Molly Myers. I'm the Academic Supports and Transition Coordinator.
And I think, do you all know Jessie? I feel like she's been to these meetings, Director of Curriculum. I know you all know Barrett and Sheila. So, I think I'll move us forward since I think otherwise, is there anyone needs an intro to? I'm making an assumption that I know, but I guess I should, what they say about assumptions. So our objectives this evening are very straightforward. This is the conversation where we're going to be looking at the AP policy and making a recommendation for revision or removal. And my hope is that by the end of our meeting this evening, we'll have come to a decision about that so that y'all can bring it forward for first and second read to the full board. If we can't get there because we aren't aligned, or Mickey and Roberto, you feel like you need Adam as well, we'll just push it to, finish the conversation next month. I think Adam has a sense of the context and the recommendation and is in support of it per his note to us. But we'll see what comes up in the conversation. So as far as our process in the agenda, I wanted to do a little bit of context setting on the policy. I have some data to step us through. I'll just assert the recommendation that the administration has aligned on and explain why. And then Roberta and Mickey here, y'all can ask questions, have discussion, and decide where you two want to land on if you want to bring something forward to the board, and if so, what you're going to recommend. Okay? Sound good? Okay, great. So just a quick context setting. In the agenda, there's some hyperlinks there, but I think the quick thing to name is that a few years ago, we talked about this policy at Curriculum Committee. Mickey, were you on Curriculum Committee when we first started talking about this? I was trying to remember.
Yes, I think so. You were just the first year when I joined the Curriculum Committee. I think we went through some of the area of concern. I think it was Mark and Miss Mariani, I think, three of us. And I think that time we had, two principals. I think we had the one from, if I remember, Lammermoor.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Sheila was a part of it. And yeah. So it sounds like, I don't think, Roberta, I don't think you were on Curriculum Committee back then, and definitely Adam was, I don't think, on the board yet. So basically, the policy that we have is really, welcome, Dr. Ahmed and Yusuf, welcome. The policy is pretty narrow in its scope. It specifically just articulates an expectation that if students enroll in AP course, they're required to take the AP exam. And so when we talked about this a few years ago, it started to bubble up because Deering was sort of taking the lead on the challenge by choice work in an effort to create more access for all students to get the opportunity to have rigorous coursework. And part of what started to happen is not all the students were taking the assessment, which then started to raise the question, we have a policy, what do we think of that? Where should we go with this? And so as a group, including all three administrators from the three high schools, so this included Dr. Ahmed, and I think Sheila, it might have been Greg back then. Was it Greg and you and Derek? All ultimately came to an agreement with the committee at the time that we wanted to revise the policy and to say that you didn't have to take the AP test, that you could take that. And if you didn't want to take the paid AP exam, we articulated a few other options that students could take in terms of a release exam that would be counted in their grade, or the CLEP, is it, Sheila? Yes. Yeah. So we sort of provided some other options that we thought could better match students' goals and sort of, give more options to teachers and students. And we had a conversation about committing resources for students that did want to take the test so that paying for the test wasn't a barrier to being able to do it. So that was kind of the nature of the conversation at the time. At that time, I think it was actually Marnie, but I know some board members also surfaced the question, why do we have this policy? Do we need this policy? And that, I think we were like, oh, it's a good question. We kind of didn't get super deep into unpacking it, but it was something that surfaced as a question about, do we even need to have a policy about this? It's not really a policy that's required or anything by the state. So that's kind of what we talked about. We were going to move it forward to the full board. And then we paused because we started to hear some pushback from some teachers and some concern. And we hadn't done a ton of extensive change management work with teachers, to be honest, not anticipating it was going to be needed. And so we paused, and then things happened like a pandemic, and we just did not pick that back up. And so this is a loose thread, and we're trying to tie it off and do it with an orientation toward the broad policy work we're doing, which is to really evaluate our policies with an equity lens and make sure that policies are not acting as barriers to access for all students. So that's kind of what happened. And then I'll pause for additions from Dr. Ahmed or Sheila or anybody else. And then after that, I'll kind of bring us to where we are today with our data and what we recommend. So
can you pause a little bit, Marnie? I just need to get a few clarification. I think maybe
sure.
For Roberto, we can come to the same speed. I want to go back to the genesis a little bit of why in that policy we have some fees. Because when I look at those both high school and I see Deering has by choice and Portland High School, I think they have a more selective, you need to pass the exams to be selected for some AP classes. So I just want to know, or if it's not, or
nope.
So I just want to have some clarification. Why is the reason behind the fees? Is because we have to, why is that?
So Mickey, I'll help to clarify that, and
thanks, Sheila.
Emily can jump in. We do not require anyone to take a test to get into the class.
Okay.
The policy has always been that students are required to take the test. And that's why we brought it to you, because the policy hasn't necessarily been 100% followed. And it's brought up lots of conversations about how we want to address this issue from an equity lens. We allow students to choose to take an AP course.
Okay.
And the policy has been that they take the exam, but now we want to bring that up. Do we really need to take the exam?
Okay.
But there is no test that students have to take to get into an AP course. The College Board charges a fee for students who do take the test.
Oh, okay.
And what happens is if a student gets a certain grade on this test, they're graded on a scale of 1 to 5. If a student gets a 3, 4, or 5, that score could possibly count toward a college credit for them when they go on to school. Some colleges accept those AP course scores of a 3, 4, or 5, and some do not. So for students, $95 and getting a 3, 4, or 5 is it's a savings versus having to pay $1,500 for a course in their freshman year in college. But I think Ms. Emerson can speak more to that. Not all colleges accept the course. Even if kids get a 3, 4, 5, a lot of schools don't. And so we've just found, why would we do that to students? And then we've also found that the range of engagement or attitude toward taking the test has really shifted in the past 3 to 5 years. And even some of our top students don't put their full effort into taking the test on test day. And so in my 5 years at Portland High, have seen a range of student attitude toward taking the test. And our teachers spend an awful lot of time preparing students for the test. And we'd like to really think about where we do want to spend our time when we offer these rigorous AP courses. And it isn't, honestly, it's not necessarily preparing them to take a test. It's about getting into the content of, why of the course, whether it's English or psych or science.
Okay, thank you so much. It's more clear to me. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Great. Anything else Sheila or Dr. Ahmed or anyone on the team would want to add to the context I shared before I shift to where we are now in our data? Okay. Okay, great. Oh, Yusuf, did you have a question? I think you're muted.
Yeah, sorry. Hi, everybody. So for Ms. Jepson, the 3, 4, or 5 scores that they may get, is it toward science, math, or it's just general class?
Yeah, it's in whatever course they've taken the test in. So students take, at both of our schools, we offer AP English, we offer AP Psychology, AP Biology, AP Chem, AP US History, AP Art. So it's whatever the student takes a test in. And then I'll just add this piece: for whatever course we don't offer, there's a statewide program that's called AP for All, and students can take a course online, an AP course online, through the University of Maine at Fort Kent. And they can take it in macroeconomics, government, or in any course that we do not offer. And then those students could also ask they can choose to take the test for those courses that we don't offer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I just go back to Portland High School? And I think Sheila, is really good to clarify that, because there's a lot of assumption being, carry on for years about the accessibility of the AP classes for some marginalized students. And I think that's exactly what I heard for years. Then he been so selective on the Portland High School because of the assumption about the selective fees. So people being, assuming then, to be able to access the AP classes at Portland High School, that's exactly the fees need to be applied for. So right now you're just explaining those because of those exams. So that's a really good explanation. Then we need to spread around the community to make sure then we can remove those assumptions. Because when you talk about during the choice and people being, assuming then it's been so selective for such specific student who can be able to access in Portland High School, this is exactly what the equity lens is not working well.
Right. Yeah, and I think Mickey, if students can't pay the fee, we pay it for them, or they get fee waivers through the College Board. So taking the exam is not an issue if students can't pay. Like an SAT, that's the College Board offers fee waivers, or in the past several years, the district has been paying for those tests for students. And, you know, I do want to add the challenge by choice aspect. I mean, Portland High really also does challenge by choice for students. If they want to take an AP course, they can. Okay. Ms. Emerson, again, can speak more to that as a counselor. We don't have any gatekeeping for students to choose a course. I would say probably the biggest thing that some students struggle with is summer work, because there's summer work for students to do for an AP course. I think that's most everywhere, but there is no limit to the number of students who choose to take an AP course.
Right. Yeah. Thank you so much. That's a good clarification.
You're welcome.
I see your hand, Roberto, as well. I just a quick comment. I don't know if Marissa, you wanted to add anything, or Dr. Ahmed, if you wanted to say anything about challenge by choice, but I want to get into the data because I think that will be helpful too. So this was just me trying to set the scene as to, we did work on the policy 3 years ago. I was trying to catch us up to, like, now we're picking it back up. I have a little bit more context to set on that, which may connect. Like, we have the financials we're going to look at. We're going to look at demographic breakdown in terms of the courses, things like that. So we're going there. But just again, this is like where we were 3 years ago. Is there any clarification there? But before I go to see, is there anything on Mickey and Yusuf's question? Marissa, I saw you. Did you want to add anything, or Dr. Ahmed, anything else you wanted to say on that?
I think, good evening, everyone. Ms. Bondo, what you mentioned about the equity and access, it is perennial or something that existed for a long time, that not unique to PPS, but in the U.S. educational system, that there is no equal or representation of races and racial groups and ethnic groups in some of the positive aspects of our learning, and also the same in the negative aspects of our schooling, like discipline data and all those stuff. So this exists, and there are some barriers which are systematic, and some of them need really some efforts from us to just put it on the table and say, like, how we can address it. And those things include, it may be financial, it may be like staffing, it may be like if we place students in rigorous AP courses, what are the support systems and what are investments and resources we need to make so that they are successful in where we place them, rather than being like embarrassed and being like not being able to access the course. So there is more into it, but to put it on the table that Portland Public School is not unique or different than the trend is of, and I will say it's an unknown part of the system, as insiders critique, that we are not unique to, or we are not anomaly when it comes to the, inequities, and something that we need to put on the table and work on it.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. And you'll see that in our data as well. Okay, Marissa, I'm not seeing, is there another, I know, Roberto, you've had your hand up for a little while. Do you want to?
This is more probably a request, and you might even cover it with the data soon. I was just wondering, from the BAR grant study that we looked at the 2016 graduates and identified enrolling in AP classes as one of the activities that are conducive to post-secondary success for our students. Can we differentiate which students took the test and didn't from that data?
Like specific or demographics?
I don't know how detailed the data was that we looked into, but I do recall, AP and AP enrollment being a key indicator of post-secondary success. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if the data can differentiate the students who did demonstrate post-secondary enrollment and post-secondary success. If they, on top of taking the AP classes, also we can tell whether they took the test or not.
Oh, I see. I don't think that data set from BAR, correct me if I'm wrong, Barrett, did that, because really what BAR found was that it's not about taking the test. It was being in the rigorous coursework. There was a correlation between students taking rigorous coursework, passing and having post-secondary success in terms of a persistence in 2 and 4 year college.
Yeah, I don't remember that. I'll do some digging in the full data set to see if there is anything while you're continuing the meeting, and I'll send anything I can find, but I don't recall that. So I think what Malia said is accurate.
Dig too deep. I don't want to take too much of your time. It was just wondering.
Yeah. Great. So Lindsay, if you're listening, which I think you are, can you promote Gavin and Bay to panelists just so they can join us? I'm going to transition us now to looking at some data, and Gavin, who I think Mickey and Roberto, is going to join us. And then Bay is an intern on the data team right now and is a Portland graduate, I think went to Deering. And she is the mastermind behind the data set we're about to look at. So I'm thrilled that she's here and taking our analysis to the next level. And as I jump into this, I do just, again, for Mickey and Roberto, want to say, hi, welcome. That looking at AP and the questions that you're raising about who's getting access to the rigorous coursework, that is all connected to the first priority of the district, where we have a focus on strengthening Tier 1 instruction and making sure we're holding all kids to high expectations, giving them the support they need, and making sure everybody has access to grade level learning. And so our high school administration team is going to be digging very deep into this as part of our year-long conversation about core instruction at high school. And I would imagine you'll be interested in some of the deeper questions about that. And so I think, of course, it's, you can ask questions and that will be your interest, but I just want to caveat that our high school team hasn't spent a lot of deep time with this data set yet. So we want to do more work to kind of unpack it and talk about its connection to our first priority. But for today, we're really just focused on understanding more about our context in order to make a recommendation about revising the policy or eliminating it altogether. And again, the policy is just about whether or not you have to take the test. So just kind of making sure we're level set on what we are and aren't doing today, because I'm sure you'll get interested in stuff that goes beyond the scope of the policy as well. So I am going to share my screen. And I think this is working. So just shout out if you're not following along with me. And then Bay, if you're comfortable, but also Molly and Gavin, chime in as I make mistakes or if I say, can you help me with this? So we're going to look at basically an overview of our students taking AP, breaking it down in terms of demographics, racial, English language learners, and economically disadvantaged. And then we're going to look at this by high school, and then we'll look at students taking the test. So just generally, who are our students, who's taking AP, how does that look broken down by school, and then what does the test taking pattern tell us? Okay. And then, oh boy, Bay. I feel like you'll be able to more quickly explain essentially that we're going to be looking at some cumulative data. Do you want to describe it, Bay, or do you want me to try to go ahead?
No, totally. I can jump in. So basically, we have 3 different data sets that we're looking at. One is students that are enrolled in AP classes. So a student that's enrolled in 1 or more AP classes, as well as our demographic information. And then we'll be comparing that to total enrollments. So the total enrollments we used are cumulative student enrollments. So rather than the static October 1st date, it's a greater number at each school. So it's all the kids that came and went during the school year, or kids that maybe came in after the October 1st, then stayed the whole year, moved or whatever. So that's why that number is going to look a lot bigger at some of the schools. And then the other data set is the test taker data set. So that comes from the AP test. So it doesn't have all the student numbers. So we basically have to merge that on to get the demographics there. So they're like 3 distinct data sets.
Thanks, Bay. So as we go, you can chime in where that is relevant, or folks, as you start to have clarifying questions, go ahead and chime in. So I'll kind of kick us off here. So this shows the number and percent of students in high school that were enrolled in, I think, 1 or more AP courses starting back in the school year 16-17 up until this past year. And so overall, you see where the percent of students enrolling in AP courses is increasing over time. This gives you racial breakdown. So up at the top, this is just the racial breakdown of the district from 2017 to 2021. And down at the bottom, it shows the racial breakdown of students who were enrolled in AP courses. So for example, in 2021, you can see that 53% of the students identify as white, and 67% of the students taking AP courses identify as white. So we see some disproportionality in terms of white students being overrepresented in the total students taking AP courses. And this matches the trend and the pattern that we saw in the bar data that Roberto had mentioned as well. Molly, Bay, Gavin, et cetera, chime in if you feel I'm missing a key point as I go. This is the bottom graph of what we just looked at. I think it's just sort of giving it a bigger picture so you can see it more clearly. So again, the racial breakdown of students, of AP students over the years. So I'll let you look at that for a second, make sure that's internalized. So overall, we see the number of students increasing, like we mentioned in the first slide. And we're going to look I think, Bay, in terms of, we still see disproportionality. Do we see the percent of students of color increasing, though, in terms of students enrolled in AP overall in the district?
It's decreasing, and we'll see that. That's more clear in the next slide.
Okay, yeah. So as I mentioned previously, percent of white students in AP courses is disproportionately high. And then I guess this answers the other piece. I'm pausing here so you guys can have a second to process, but just slow me down if you want more time to look at a slide and just take it in. And then this shows percent of each racial group that was taking AP courses. And so here's where you can see, I guess, the question I was asking Bay in terms of when you break it down by racial group, who's going up and who's going down. So it seems like the biggest jumps over time have been with Asian students and white students in terms of the increase in the population of students taking AP coursework.
This probably doesn't need to be said, but for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander, it's just such a small number of students. This is why I asked this question when I was meeting with Bay and Jamie. But I think it's for a minute there, I was like, well, should we take it out? It's such a small number of students, but I do think it's telling that even if it's 3 or 10 or whatever, that the number is like significantly decreasing. And so, but it is kind of, that's why it's so wildly different, is because it's just such a small number of students.
Thanks, Molly. Now this looks at it by students who are English language learners. So the percent of native English speakers is overrepresented in the AP student population. So you see up on the top, just the general breakdown of students who are English language learners over time. And so the light kind of green at the bottom is never an English language learner. The next bar up, the medium green, teal, I don't know what, is exited EL. And then the top bar are students who are English language learners at the time. And so you can see, for example, 65% of the students were never EL in the total district, but 78% of the students taking AP courses were never EL. So once again, we see this showing us disproportionality when we break this down by English language learners, and that continues to match the patterns we were seeing in the bar data. Are people raising their hands?
I saw Roberto. I didn't want to like jump in ahead of him, so I raised my hand following his. So I think.
Okay, go ahead.
I guess before I ask the question, are we gonna look at offerings, like what classes we offer?
No, because we're not, like I said, we're not really getting into this whole deeper conversation about coursework. And we're really just talking about, do we need to have a requirement that kids take the test? So I think the high school team will continue getting deeper in that. And we can bring that forward into conversation with you all. But today, no, just given the scope of what we're focused on in the policy.
Yeah. I guess I was just wondering, and this is more for, as that conversation keeps happening, do the offerings that we have also influence participation overall, right? And also, I was going to ask, do we have any AP offerings that are that are taught in a language other than English? And just I guess those questions about the courses that we have, and I don't want to get into that level of detail right now, but just I want to, when we review this again, just understand how the offerings and the shift of offerings, right? I really don't, I never took AP, sorry. I just wonder how that influenced the level of enrollment. And of course, the diversity of our student enrollment.
Yeah. And I spoke with Jamie today, actually, and I know that she had been looking at, and I don't know with you, Bay, a little other questions about, she said it's interesting when you start to look at which courses students are actually taking tests in. And then when you start to break that down, like foreign languages was one where there was a lot of test takers and it was a lot of fluent speakers where they were taking advantage of that opportunity to get the 3, 4, 5 and potentially get the credit. So that gets to be, I guess, incredibly complicated because that's not a data set in our system. So it doesn't have our student ID attached. It's the student name. And then you get into all the complexity about matching names. So that's something we're starting to look at. But again, for purposes of today, we're just trying to decide whether or not we need to require this test. So we didn't go all the way down into the full set of data. Mickey, did you want to ask something about this slide before I move forward?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I know then today we just have the policy to remove the test or not, but we just need to be aware that if removing the test is going to change anything on the engagement or participation or what, because when I look at the data is like what we have available for those students to try, what we have available for those marginalized students, and we see the percentage here to be able to participate. So that means the challenges and by barriers need to be expressed. We need to go more deeper there because removing just the test is not assuring then it's gonna be increase of participation. Yeah. So we just need to make that's it may be one of the steps then we try to do, but I mean is more deeper understanding on first of all why they not attending. If it's just the barrier of the testing or the barrier of the any structure support they need to have, or maybe they just don't understand the value or to access some AP classes. I had two students, two of my kids, they went to during high school, they all had AP classes. Mm-hmm. They all graduated with a lot of AP classes. Mm-hmm. So I try to understand a little more deep. And I think we may go in with more deeper conversation, Maria, because just removing the tests for me is not doing anything good to those students. Is more internal each schools, and we really need to work on that to see how all the students they can value the importance of the AP class, and those AP class can help them to move to all high academic achievement. Is the way we're selling those classes to those students.
Yeah. I mean, I think that you have universal agreement that the core issue is making sure all students get access to rigorous coursework. And and that the root causes are broader and deeper than this little policy around test the test. But I do think that's the policy we have that we want to kind of settle. But again, I think absolutely there are multiple root causes that are leading to this trend we're seeing and that we saw in our bar data, which is disproportionality. And of course, the cause is not students. It's the way we've designed our system and structures in the institution. And so we're trying to sort of tackle them piece by piece. And this is just one small piece, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're looking at the breakdown by students who are economically disadvantaged. The headline is the number of AP students increases, the number of students who are economically disadvantaged in AP courses decreases. So, we see more students taking AP classes, but the driver of that is not about, more students who are from low-income backgrounds getting access. It's more students who are not economically disadvantaged taking the courses. And here you see it broken up by this, kind of chart, which might be easier to see. So here in the middle, percent of students who are economically disadvantaged in high school since 2016. And then over here, percent of students who are economically disadvantaged who are in AP courses. So you can see a decrease in both cases. But Bay, you were saying it's a bigger decrease in terms of the percent who are in AP courses when you calculated this? Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I'll keep going. So that's kind of globally across the district, and now we're just going to look at the same data, but broken down by high school. I think, Bay, you spoke to these enrollment, like the data sets previously. Is there anything else you'd want to add here in terms of the context on the data?
No, it's really just that it's a cumulative enrollment. So to remember that if the population of a high school and it looks inflated, it's just because it's taking in consideration all the kids that have sort of like come in and out of that school over the year.
Awesome. Thank you. So here up above, similar pattern we're looking at. So we see just general enrollment over time, cumulative again. And then down below, this is number of AP students each year by school. So Portland and Deering are seeing a rise in the number of AP students. And then we're going to look in a minute at the percentage. So I'll give you a second to process this. Okay. And so here you can see across all three schools. So if you're looking at this data, this dark color is Casco, this middle color is Deering, and this light color is Portland High. And then this starts in 2017 and goes to 2021. And then up above, I think it shows more clearly the trend line, which is that in all three schools, we see over time more students taking AP courses. So that's what you can kind of see. And this top line is Deering, and then the middle line is Portland, and this bottom line is Casco. But across the board, there's an increase in AP enrollment across all schools. And then this, can you speak to this one, Bay?
Yeah, sure. So this is sort of just looking at when you just look at all the AP students, like are more of them at Portland or more of them at Deering. So the bottom graph is the percentages of like where AP students are. So basically every year, like 50% of the students, of the AP students are at Deering, which is half of them. And then the percentage for the other schools as well. So for Casco, it's a lower percentage. I mean, it's a smaller school, so that makes sense, but it's 16% the first year of the AP students are at Casco, and that sort of like stays pretty similar. But you can see that like the percentage is the AP students at Portland is going up a little slightly, and at Deering is slightly going down.
Thanks, Bae. And now we're looking at the racial makeup of the high school. So this is not AP's enrollment yet. This is just giving us context in terms of the overarching racial makeup of the high school. So red is white. And then here in your key over here, orange, 2 or more races, yellow, Native Hawaiian or other Pacific Islander. That's Hispanic Latino. And then this light green is Black or African American. And this color here is Asian, and the very top is American Indian or Alaska Native. And so that's just sort of general demographic patterns. We'll look at this, I think, Tuesday night at the board meeting too, when we talk about high schools. And so if this is the general makeup of the schools, this now represents who's enrolled in AP courses. And so here, this is Portland, fewer AP students and a higher percentage of the students that are in AP are white. And then I think across the board, we see disproportionality, but here you can see Deering has a higher percent or number of students of color who are taking AP coursework. And so here it is compared on the same slide, so you can kind of visually compare that a little bit more. So up above, the first slide I shared, which is overall racial makeup of the high school, and down below, AP enrollment across the high schools, broken down by racial demographics. All right. And somebody shout out if anybody's raising their hand, because it's kind of hard for me to see the little cues. So now we're doing the same thing, but looking at it in terms of students who are economically disadvantaged. So up here on the top is the general makeup of the high schools. So the dark green on top are students who are economically disadvantaged. And at the bottom are students who are, opposite, sorry. The bottom are students who are economically disadvantaged. The top are students who are not. So basically what we're looking at is the difference between this top and the bottom, which is showing us yet again the disproportionality, which is present across all of the high schools, with, it looks like, Deering being a little bit closer to proportional, though we see a little bit of a dip here in this last year, it looks like. Okay, so that's who's in our high schools and who's taking AP. And now this shows us who's taking the AP exam. So this looks at the number of AP students and the number of test takers at each school. And so, you know, here at the top, Casco Bay, from 2017 to 2021, you see the number of students enrolled in AP. And then below that is the number of students who took the test. And then below that is the percentage of the students who were in AP who took the test. So you can see some real differences here in terms of the three high schools and the percentage of the students that are enrolled in AP that are taking the test or not. I mean, obviously this last year across the board, we saw a dip, and probably, you know, even in 2020, there might've been issues. But you know, looking from 2017 to 2020 might be more telling of the trend line, since last year was such an anomaly with COVID. And so Portland High has, you know, been sticking most true to the policy that's on the books. And my understanding is that Deering, when, you know, around when they did challenge by choice, loosened expectations around the test just to eliminate that as a potential barrier to access. And then I can say that I know Casco, after we did some of that work on the policy and drafted new language, Derek has shared with me that they started to use the new language as their guide, even though it wasn't formally adopted. in terms of policy.
Can I just get a clarification here?
Mm-hmm.
On those AP exams, so if I compare with the Deering, I mean, Deering students are not required to take a test. If he's not required, he was not required, but Portland High School was a requirement.
I mean, I think that my understanding is that we still have the policy that says it's required.
Right.
Portland High was sticking to what the policy articulated.
Exactly.
You know, that was, you know, they were following what the policy said. Mm-hmm. I think during when, and certainly Dr. Ahmed, you can chime in and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the moves that happened when they were trying to really deliberately encourage more students to access AP coursework was a loosening of that expectation, despite the policy on the books, which is, again, back when I was setting context, part of why this bubbled up, because people are starting to ask questions. Wait, Deering's not requiring kids to take the test. I thought that was our policy. And so we're like, yeah, let's talk about it. Because as you can see, Deering does have more students of color and more economically disadvantaged students in AP than the other two schools. And this was, you know, so this might say this is a barrier. Again, back to your point, I don't think it's the only issue. But that's sort of what made this conversation bubble up, was both the moves they were making and the fact that we started to realize that schools were inconsistent in their implementation of the policy, which led us to this question of, you know, you can either say everybody has to be strict with the policy, or in our case, right, wait, do we think this is the right policy?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. And then here you can see this broken down in terms of racial demographics. And so this is telling us up at the top, enrollment in AP coursework broken down by racial groups. And at the bottom, it's showing us test takers. And so over here on the side, at Deering, only 30% of Black AP students took an AP test, while 65% of white AP students did. At Portland, more AP students took tests than at Deering, representing greater percentages across all racial groups.
Leah, and this hasn't been said, but maybe it's just assumed, but we picked 2019 because it's the last sort of normal year of AP. Like, just so much was different 2020 and 2021. So that's why it's 2019.
Thanks, Molly. And now this is looking at the same comparison in terms of students who are enrolled in the course as compared to who took the test, broken down by those who are economically disadvantaged and those who are not. And so here at Deering, only 34% of the economically disadvantaged students took an AP test, while 64% of the non-economically disadvantaged students did. And at Portland and Casco, roughly all of the non-economically disadvantaged students enrolled in AP courses took an AP test. I love that slide, Bay. and end. So I want to just do one other quick thing, which is the financial perspective. And then we can ask questions about the data. And then I would like to get to asserting our recommendation and having you all kind of ask questions and talk about that. So Jessie, I can kind of step through this, or would you prefer to do it yourself?
Either one.
Go ahead if you're game.
Okay, great. So last year, we had 500 students who were AP students, and make sure I get this right, 242 of these AP students took at least one exam. So many students take more than one exam. So that's why that group took 401 exams. And so we just saw some data that said about 25% of the AP testers are economically disadvantaged, and the AP assessment costs $96 if, the full cost is $96, but if you are economically disadvantaged, the College Board gives you a discount, so it costs $53. But we said as a district that we would pay for anybody who is economically disadvantaged, right? So the total cost, if all of those students were reimbursed, would be $5,300, if that makes sense to people. And then I just did a quick sort of analysis, like what would happen if we paid for everybody to take an AP assessment. And so if you take all 401 exams, including the discount, that would cost $34,000. Currently, if this makes sense, we have budgeted in our assessment budget $7,440. So that covers the $5,300 to basically cover students that are economically disadvantaged to take an AP assessment. So obviously, if all students took the assessment, that would be an even higher investment. And then the next slide shows our assessment budget. So this is sort of as an overview of our entire assessment budget in terms of the tools that we use. And so, as you know, there's been sort of a, we have had we've paid for much of this in ESSER, so it kind of got split up. And so the total investment this year is $97,000, and then that's split out between local and ESSER 2. So the local total is roughly $62,000, and the ESSER 2 total is $35,000. And then within the local, you'll see College Board PSATs, PACE interims, which is sort of our more internal assessment system. Dial 4 is a pre-K and K screener. Teacher Strategies Gold is a pre-K assessment, and then the AP exams are in there. And then the ESSERF is more additional money for the PACE interim and the pre-K screener and a dyslexia screener. So that gives you sort of a picture of where AP falls within the larger budget.
Thanks, Jessie. And I think it's helpful, like if you come back here again, if we were to pay for all the students, total cost estimate would take to pay for all students who took the exam last year. This is the $34,000 for all students who are economically disadvantaged, Jessie, or for all students, period?
For all students, period. We're currently paying for all students that are economically disadvantaged.
Right. So just wanted to give you a sense of scale, 34. So that would be over half of our total local assessment investment at this point. So just to give folks a sense of that.
And I just pause there for clarification. So that would just be of the people who took the test last year. And we know that only a certain percentage of students took the test last year. So if we were to actually pay for every student to take a test, an exam in their AP course, it would be at least double that, I would assume.
Correct.
So, yeah.
Right, yeah. Marissa. And I think meaning that it would like probably total the entire total of our local investment. For that.
I have a quick question. So those tests are done for the senior level grade, or is all grade combined?
I can answer that. So it's for, so the test is an option for any student. Right now, the test is mandatory for any student who is in an AP course.
Okay. So
if you're in
9, 10, 11.
Correct.
So actually that means, yeah.
That's how the policy reads. Yes.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So the cost should be a little more higher than if we have to have every year taking from all of them. I mean, if we have to pay for all the students, so that means the cost will be more higher every year.
Yes. Yeah. And the reason why we looked at paying for all students is when we think about this from an equity perspective, it's helpful to pay for the students who are economically disadvantaged and who can't pay. It's even better to remove the cost barrier for everyone so that you don't have to be the one student who's like going to the counselor and I can't afford it, I need help. So what's best is that, we remove that altogether so you don't have to be the kid or the parent who's going and asking for support to pay, but that it's just a non-issue, which is why we wanted to understand what that would require from an investment perspective.
Right.
So I guess, I wanted to share one more thing and then we'll talk about all this. So this finally is the work we did as a team, like I mentioned a few years ago. So here you see at the top The original language of the policy, which is the advanced placement program, consists of academically challenging courses that have been developed for the purpose of providing opportunities for students to pursue post-secondary level courses and receive credit. The offering of an AP course is contingent upon a minimum enrollment of 15 students unless otherwise approved by the school committee and the availability of staff member qualified to teach the course. Students who register for AP courses are required to take the AP exam. In hardship cases, the exam fee may be reduced at the principal's discretion. So that was originally adopted in 1984 and then revised in 1992 and 2005. And then what we had worked on was this new language, which keeps the same opening paragraph and then goes on to say, students who register for AP courses are required to take a rigorous college level exam connected to the course. Students may choose from official AP examination, the CLEP, which is college level examination program examination, or a teacher graded release AP examination. To ensure access to all exam options for all students, the district will reduce or cover the cost of the AP examination and or CLEP examination for students receiving free and reduced lunch. So that brings us to this evening. And so I'll just come out and say our recommendation, and then we can take questions from you, Mickey and Roberto, and you two can kind of discuss and deliberate. And just for the team, we're obviously more of us than board members, but from process here, it's really their space to talk and discuss and debate, and we're here to answer questions. So I'll kind of facilitate, our team if to pop to where questions, but we're kind of fishbowling Roberto and Mickey to let them have a dialogue about where they want to go with this. And so our recommendation is to eliminate the policy. It's not required. We checked in with our lawyers. They said, absolutely not as far as a requirement. You absolutely do not need a policy on this topic and should feel free to delete it. And then technically it's a good idea to go through a 2-read process to delete, is what we got from lawyers. And so the reason why we're recommending this is, ultimately the revised language we asserted is really giving teachers and principals discretion over what makes sense for students. And so that just seems really about educational practice and like it doesn't require a policy. We would continue to put money into our budget to make sure students who want to take the exam can. I think it would be a bigger conversation about whether or not we'd want to remove the barrier altogether, because that would require significant resource. But at the minimum, we would continue to maintain the current practice, which is to budget to make sure kids who want to do it can do it. But that we would leave it up to the discretion of our high school principals to work with their counselors and teachers to decide what makes sense for students in their own coursework. And I think, it's different in different districts, different schools. We all have our story, right? I did IB way back in the day, and I took about half the tests because I took the ones where I thought it was going to be worth my while and I'd get the credit, and my parents were not interested in paying for the ones that, and that's a story we hear from a lot of people. But I think our goal is creating access to rigorous coursework for all kids, removing any potential barrier. And I think the assessment's a great choice for many kids in some places, but I think we're just saying, you even see in the data, I think even Portland High has been most true to the policy, but even they haven't had 100% of their kids over the past years taking it. So there's always reasons for some kids not to want to do it. So our recommendation is removing the policy around requiring taking the test rather than to revise it to giving all these options, which is what will happen in practice if we do remove it. So I guess Mickey and Roberto, I don't know if you want to facilitate, Mickey, for yourselves questions and then discussion. And we're all here, obviously, to answer questions as you all have them.
Yeah. Thank you, Maria, for the presentation. So on my side, I'm really in favor to remove the policy as well, just to leave as educational practice. And I like the fairness for all students to have the opportunities to have a test. I mean, when I look at the cost, then if we have to pay for all the students, how much is going to cost to the district? And if we just need to pay for the disadvantaged students. So I think it also is not really then we're talking about equity to the academic approach for all students. So I think for me, it's going to be, I think, besides just on the leadership schools to see for the test, the exam, the testing exam, who want to take it or not. And I think to see about if we can remove also the cost. I mean, if those tests can be, if we have to pay for all the students. This is the way I see. If we have to pay for the student. But if we can afford to pay for all the students, so is any way student can just getting those AP classes as educational practice, but don't have to take any exams?
Say the question again, Mickey.
So if we just remove the policy, I mean, the AP classes is just like all the classes, I mean, educational practice for all the classes. So that means students, they are not required to take an exam if they don't want to. So it's not going to be any requirement. It's just going to depend on each student. I mean, if you want to take it, you take it. If you don't have to.
Correct. If we remove it, it will be up to the discretion of the student, the family, and the administrator and the teacher.
Okay, yeah. Roberto, so this is me. I mean, I'm really in favor, and I think that's the way to go on my side. Yeah, I would like to remove the barriers.
Thank you, Mickey. Yeah, I'm comfortable removing the policy, and the rationale behind it makes sense. I'm more interested in understanding more about our budgeting item to cover the expenses. My assumption is that the act of removing the policy automatically will drop the number of students that will take the test, and so that number that we saw would be much smaller. But that's an assumption, right? I think, like we stated, there is a benefit to taking the test, so we should always expect some students to favor that or to prefer that. I'm intrigued, like I said, to see what that number looks like with the policy absent. And unfortunately, that's either a guess beforehand or too late to cover afterwards. And then aim towards covering all the students that take it, which then leads us to assume that if you offer to pay it, more kids will take it. So there's almost like catch-22. But I'm perfectly comfortable with the suggestion or the recommendation of removing the policy as we keep then exploring the budgeting piece and how do we then decide to cover the cost. Okay. And then just as a side note, I'm intrigued in all aspects of this conversation. Like we talked about, how do we in general increase participation? Because this is just one of those barriers. So I applaud us. I know this has been ongoing for a while, and obviously those numbers reflect that we've been putting some effort into it. We just have to continue to identify barriers and bring them down. It's an ongoing work, and I applaud us just for taking it on and being and having it on our agenda.
Yeah, that's great, and I do think that you'll see where Casco and Deering started to use the new language, a reduction in test takers. So I think that gives us some data that would be an indication. But it's a great question. And I think the other place the board plays a significant role is in setting the budget. I think that we'll want to look holistically because I'm concerned about how much of our curriculum and assessment tool is in ESSERP at this point. So there are other critical assessment tools that we're going to have to figure out how to fund. So I think sort of looking at that holistically will be really important in terms of maintaining and growing quality tools for our educators. But yeah, that certainly will be something, Jesse, when we do budgeting stuff, should make sure to highlight for the committee and the board. And we'll be working with our principals around like, where do we think are the most strategic investments when it comes to assessment in particular. And yeah, I think, like I said, we're going to keep talking about this broader priority we have around access to grade level learning with the appropriate supports and scaffolds, which is our first big priority as a district. And I think, I do think that all three schools are super committed and have been doing tons of work to identify and remove barriers and to try to figure out how to get more kids access with appropriate support. So I would celebrate all three schools. And I think in this data set, we see Deering is a place where we can look more closely at they have a higher percent of kids of color who are in these classes. And I think that's something we want to study collectively. And there's other practices across all schools that we're trying to study and learn from. So that is an ongoing conversation. So Mickey and Roberto, I think, do you need to vote together to advance a recommendation? Do you want to do that formality now?
Can we?
Yeah, Mickey, we should just a regular motion. I just have one more question.
Mm-hmm.
On the funding piece. So I know that the economically disadvantaged students have a lower fee for the test. Is there anything else that students and families can do to get this cost coverage? Is there anything else? I won't even make assumptions.
Go ahead, Marissa. Thank you.
I wish that there was. Unfortunately, the College Board is the College Board. And I think we all feel even charging $56 for economically disadvantaged students is a laugh. And that is the lowest that they will go.
Are you done, Roberto? I have just a follow-up question.
I think Dr. Ahmed had a thing to add on to Marissa's. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Mr. Rodriguez, for asking this question. It is really breaks my heart whenever we tell a student, fill out this form and I will sign and demonstrate that you are poor to me. So, and my mom cannot pay, my father cannot pay. And did you fill out the free and reduced lunch, all those things? So that's one of the reasons that, we were absorbing some of the, the 50 something dollars, just saying zero, a waste, or students bring as a social worker. So it is really another way of inequitable kind of demonstrate that you are poor to me and or to the school, and we will feel, and that's aspect that I don't like practicing. Mm-hmm. So if we are paying $53, if you take 2 classes, it's high. So the budgeting for that will be a great actually, because $53 is high.
And to that end, is our data on economically disadvantaged students and families accurate? Because families are filling out the forms.
Yeah, I don't know, Gavin, if you're here and if you want to chime in, because we saw that number being reduced. I think that's always an issue. But Gavin, would you want to say anything about that?
I think there's a few issues. The number is decreasing. We're partially because the school district is becoming more affluent potentially, but also we always see a drop off from middle school to high school in terms of economic disadvantage. Fewer people fill out the forms, and now that we've gone to universal lunches, there's even less of an incentive to fill it out. And so we suspect that a lot of it is just folks not filling out the forms because there's no reason to. So I would say there's a good chance there are lots of students who would qualify who aren't showing up as such.
Yeah, and that's been what we've heard, over the last several years as a trend. So we do see the numbers of fewer. I guess never mind.
Yeah,
I was going to ask the same question a different way, but I caught myself.
We could talk about the exact numbers, and that'll come up next week in the board meeting.
Yeah.
Thank you, Gavin. Appreciate it.
So my follow-up question is that when I heard about now we have the universal lunch required for all students. So we won't have the correct data on reduced lunch student, right? So now if we have some, are we going to be able to identify those students disadvantaged student and be able to cover the fees or the tests or those exams if they want to take some.
So I'll just chime in on that as well. I assume that all three schools have similar modes together for assessing that information. So we have students fill out a form, identifying what tests they are going to take, and also if they receive free and reduced lunch or have some sort of financial barrier. And just to be really clear that I totally agree with what Dr. Ahmed is saying. Anytime that you make a student demonstrate that inequity is it is heartbreaking. So thank you for bringing that up, Dr. Ahmed. Really, really important. And that but since that is the only way that we are able to identify at this point, when people have talked to me as the AP coordinator about a financial hardship, I've of course granted that. And I also just wanted to clarify that although College Board, and I think this was clarified before, but just to clarify again, although College Board charges the $56, we are definitely charging $0 to our economically disadvantaged students. So I just want to be really clear about that.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying, Marissa and Dr. Ahmed, I mean, that's why when Jesse was stepping through the financials, we wanted to see what it would cost to cover everybody, because that removes the experience you heard Dr. Ahmed describe and Marissa, affirm is true, which is having to prove that you have that need, which is not always comfortable for kids, and it sort of singles them out in that way.
So if we look at that to be able to cover everybody, so we can remove those assumptions for those students. I mean, they really feel ashamed and then sometimes uncomfortable, and downsize. But that's the reality. So so we need to know how many students. I mean, next year, know how many students have been enrolled for the AP classes and who are willing to take some exams. So we can try to see in our budget how we can be able to advocate to get the cost for everybody.
Yeah, I think what we'll do, I mean, I would recommend now voting on the recommendation to remove the policy so we can kind of move that piece forward. And then as we in December start to gear up for conversations about budget, I think, Jesse, if you can take note to work with counselors to do some possible projections looking at the trends of the three high schools and what happened. So we won't know exactly, just so we can look at that. I mean, I think we all agree. And then, of course, any of these things we want to invest in isolation, it feels like, duh. I think our challenge is when we put that together with everything else that also has a justification that's connected to our equity goal. If we don't get everything we want through an approved budget from you all or a city, then it's like, how do we start to understand the choices and the implications? But I think all of us, just to be clear, would love to not have to even have this whole thing be an issue, and would love to have all the resources we need for this and everything else that's very comparable to this. But, I could give you 20 examples of this kind of thing too. But yeah, I think, Jesse, let's make note of doing a deeper analysis of that so we can really try to size up what that might look like. And I think Marissa, probably working with you all as a guidance team can help us look at those projections when we start looking at budget.
Okay. So,
great.
Yeah. So can we move the recommendation, Mr. Rodriguez?
So moved.
All right. So we are both in favor. Right.
Thank you.
There you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking our recommendation as an administrative team. And I do believe, to the extent this was or is a barrier, it's gone. And I believe that our administrators and teachers have a very high bar for our kids, and will continue to try to give kids access and give them the support they need to be successful. And I think the experience of exposure to rigorous coursework, we know through all the data sets locally and nationally, is significant. So this is our continued work to make sure that that's happening for all of our students. So appreciate the support.
Can I ask a quick question? Malia, when this goes up to the full board, do you anticipate just a quick run through of the process, or do you think this will require like a workshop and go into a more extensive conversation? And that usually we want Emily and Javier to determine that, but what do you envision would happen so that we as a committee understand how in depth do you want that to get with the board?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, definitely one that we should, I mean, I guess I would kind of punt it back to you. I think like our instinct here, people will get interested in the bigger conversation, but the sort of scope of the policy itself is pretty narrow. So I don't know. And I would also ask our high school administrators if you think there's going to be a lot of teacher interest or comment. I think that would, if there's no teachers commenting or community members, then I don't think it would be as big of a discussion. But if we do get public comment from our own team and or from parents, then maybe we should do a workshop. What do you think, Sheila and Dr. Ahmed?
I've been working with our staff over the past many months around this issue and continuing this fall with Ms. Emerson's help. And we've met twice, and I think our teachers are of like mind that they would support the non-policy. And then in our buildings, we would establish what our focus would be, which would be to encourage but not require students to take the test. So I think that our staff would be comfortable for that, as I've begun to prepare them for what the options might be.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Jepson. And one thing, if it is, it's up to the board and up to the administration. But if it is ever comes out there, I want to make sure that the reason that a lot of or the numbers of students, especially minority students who are not taking the test, is like I don't want to say by design, but I want to say like I don't want them to like any other measures that happens in like whether it's MEAs or whether it's any other testing. We know that kids of color perform lower than their peers. So I didn't want this discouragement, like your first AP ever you took, and then I compel you to take a test and you failed, you will never go back to this. And that's that's a deliberate strategy that I was just pushing, updating. So you're saying like, get the exposure. Maybe you take if you didn't take the AP psychology, take the AP history, the one you can't feel comfortable. So that was by design and for practice purpose. So I wanted, if it comes, I won't be speaking to and saying like, this is what we didn't do the testing because we were preventing another data point where we will say like, this kid, the first time they ever get exposed to rigorous class, and then they experience a failure. And but they're passing the class, that was enough. And that they're getting exposed to this, that was enough. So this was by design. And I want to make sure that people are not, access to rigorous course is different than taking a test. So and I thank you very much, Mickey and Roberto, for supporting this. Yes, this is two different things.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I agree. I appreciate the support. And I think that this has opened up a great dialogue that's needed to happen in our schools around AP access, purpose of AP. And I know that with our counselors and with our current AP teachers, that's really good for us, I think, to have those conversations. So it's opened up an important dialogue that needs to happen, and we're going to be having it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think given this, it could make sense to do a workshop just because there is some interesting nuance. But so thank you for asking that, Roberto. So I'll connect with Javier as well. But I mean, just we have to wrap up here in a minute. But from your perspective, and Mickey, you know your colleagues on the board. Do you think we should do that? Provide workshop?
Honestly, oh God, I shouldn't say this. I worry about, like you said, how in the weeds of it would we get when what we really just want the board to understand is the spirit behind the recommendation.
Right.
And I think what we should spend the last 5 minutes talking about, about how this then leads to conversations in buildings, how our access to rigorous courses kind of philosophy is established, and then how do we work forward? And then the board should sort of kind of support you by eliminating this policy. But if we get in the weeds, then the board starts to kind of might start to not use our time as it's intended to be. But I think I always respect the chair and superintendent when they set up the agenda at their discretion at whether they have workshops or not.
Okay.
Totally agree too. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I agree too. And so I'll check on with him, but I appreciate that point because I think workshops open up an opportunity to get really deep into the weeds with our board. And then we go down a conversation that's, again, I feel like we as a teams and buildings, as Sheila's mentioned, and Dr. Ahmed, like we're having those conversations and we're also still having them as a admin team. And so I feel like that's our work right now. So, okay, I'll talk with Javier about that, but that's helpful. Wonderful. Well, that was it for our agenda this evening. Success, met our objective. I love that feeling. It feels so rare these days. So thank you. Again, a huge shout out to Bay and Gavin and Jamie on our data team. Looking back at our deck from a few years ago with our one sad data slide to today is just a total game changer. And Molly as well played a big role there. And then just huge appreciation to our administrators and Marissa representing guidance. Super helpful, Marissa, to have you here and your perspective. You're so connected into this and what it looks, sounds, feels like on the ground. And then appreciation to the academic team, Jesse and Barrett for being here and connecting all the dots. So, and Yusuf, thank you for coming to the curriculum committee tonight. Appreciate that.
Thank you so much.
So, yeah, just gratitude all around. And we will bring this forward for our team. I'll let you know when this comes up on the agenda, and I'll probably tap a few of you to see if they'll come to that meeting in case things come up. So I'll follow up with folks offline. But thank you all.
Thank you. So we're ready to adjourn?
I'll move for us to adjourn.
All right. So we are in favor. Meeting adjourned. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for a great meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. And thanks, Lindsay. Take care, everybody. Have a great night.
Good night. Thank you. Bye-bye.